Here we go. Hi, welcome to Control Talk. Now your smart buildings videocast and podcast for the week ending December 13th, 2020. It's a marvelous day of Control Trends. And the holiday spirit, we're going to bring you not one, but two co-hosts this week. As usual, we have the man, the myth, the legend, the bionic man, Kenny Smyers, and another special host this week. He's a great host. Your friend and mine, Marc Petock. Guys, welcome to the show, Big Dogs.
Thank you. Hey, Eric, you took my spot there. I'm going to introduce Marc. We want to introduce the CMCO of LinkSpring, and that's the Chief Marketing and Communication Officer.
Yeah, but if you Google what that means, you know what it means? It means big dog.
Yeah, AKA Big Dog. There you go. Well, anyhow, Marc, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. When you're saying big dog, it sounds like I should be competing in the WWF or the Worldwide Wrestling Foundation. That should be my stage name, my wrestler name. You know?
Well, listen, when you say that now, Kenny doesn't like to talk about this, but he did a stint with that and put himself through graduate school as an MMA wrestler. What was you wore on the mask, Kenny? What was your handle back then? It was something like
Jumping Johnny DeFazio.
Yeah, Jumping Johnny DeFazio. So if you ever want to know who that was really Kenny, man. That was
Hey, listen, Pittsburgh was actually a headquarters to MMA. We had, I think, the all-time great studio wrestler. We had Bruno Sammartino, if you remember him. He was world champion. He beat Tanaka, Professor Tanaka, the Japanese guys that used to do the kung fu and suspend people in the arena. And then we had George Steele. I mean, we've had probably.
Listen to him, Eric. He's just a wealth of knowledge on this.
He was a pro. This is one of the things Kenny did right before he went into the CIA.
What else did we have?
It was pretty amazing. But Fox News calls wrestling, Kenny, just so you know, and I don't want you to take offense, they call it a fake sport. Would you like to comment on that?
I wouldn't call it a fake sport because even though those guys are doing pre-recorded and rehearsed stunts or whatever, they're still 350 pounds and they're still throwing away a lot of dangerous weight and doing some pretty fancy stuff, the jumping off the ropes and whatever. It's a trained sport. And you know what? People love it, and it's very successful. And women's WWF or A or whatever it is also growing. We actually know a professional woman wressler.
Well, Marc, I think Kenny was doing this back in the time when you were in New York City hanging out with the supermodels at Studio 54. So that's going to give us some great sort of jumping off points to what we're going to talk about this week. But before we get to that, buddy, Marcus, what have you been up to? What's up with LinkSpring? How you dealing with this COVID stuff?
Just everybody's coping very well and at LinkSpring with COVID. Obviously, like everybody else, we've made some adjustments. But at the end of the day, we haven't missed a beat. And lots of exciting times. Development is continuing on. We've added to our Edge, Genesis Edge product line with a couple new controllers since the last time you and I, we all got together. And just to kind of give some teasing, come after the first of the year, we'll be making an announcement with some new additions to our technology portfolio, and we have a lot of excitement about it internally, of course, so far. And but as I said, we have not missed a beat, and we're rocking and rolling as usual.
Cool.
Very, very cool. Well, the one thing that never changes, and there's a statement called "Nothing changes but the changes," right? I think Chris Christopherson said that in some movie way back when. But, Control Trends is all about the trends. And, COVID, a lot of people are arguing that this might be a pivot point. We might see a whole new set of trends. So if you guys are good with it, what do you say we just sort of talk about the trends we're seeing and how that might affect our integrator customers? our distributors and the end users. So, Marc, any thoughts on that? What are some trends you're seeing?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is that the COVID, if anything, has forced us, meaning the industry, whether you're a provider, you're an integrator, even if you are a end user, to ensure and force that our building control systems have become more functional than ever before. I think, the fact that we've had to add new areas, whether it be indoor air quality, enhance indoor air quality, look at air filtration, air distribution, so forth and so on. The fact that our control systems have to be much more functional than they ever have been before.
I'd agree with that 100%. I think to that point, I think we've seen a surge of air purification and some of the old stuff, old school stuff like humidity and temperature control are now rising to the front. It seems things that were assumed and a lot of people declared that they were meeting these standards. Now you might have to prove them. Now you might have to actually have some sort of feedback to the occupant that there's things going on in the business, on the building, inside the organization that are enhancing, like you said, their environment. Because we used to always assume when we went to a building was safe. We mostly dealt with fire codes and test the fire alarm systems and emergency escapes. But now I think you walk into a building and you look around, you wonder, is this building someplace I want to spend time inside of, and who's running the show? So I think it's been just like we saw some sort of a locus of control change from back in the days when engineers specified the way the building should be and told the owners, this is what you want, this is what you need. Now we're seeing the owners, the users kind of dictating the way they want the space to be. So we're seeing a change of control. Locus of control has changed from this party to this party. So I think occupants now are, they're in control.
And I think that's, to add a little bit on, as I see it, is that trust is now considered a new building asset. To your point, is owners want to feel that their buildings are trusted. Occupants, tenants want to feel that their buildings are trusted. And I think that's, a whole new level that has now entered the conversation that maybe 2-3 years ago, we really were not even talking about that.
Right.
And, to go along with that, also part of the new conversation of these trends, as far as conversation goes, is the whole area of risk and truly trying to understand risk, how to manage it. What do you do to manage it, and how to mitigate it, and how to control it? And I just remembering, and you guys, been in the industry a long time as well, that that never was really much part of the conversation. And at least what I'm finding in conversations with our customers and end users and so forth, that is key and at the top of their list: trust and risk.
Right. But let's talk about the risk, Marc. What are the risks specifically we're talking about? Are they COVID related? What are the risks?
Well, I think, yes. One, it is definitely COVID related, because we're trying to do pandemic prevention in buildings. In other words, trying to counteract the spread of it, both short-term, long-term. So I think that's one of it. Two is the risk is that you don't want to risk losing occupants to unhealthy environments, being out sick, because that in turn affects productivity. In other words, if you're operating a business and you've got folks out, that's lost productivity, and that is a risk.
Okay. Well, hang on. I want to hop in and get a couple of those things. So it seems like, there's no way you're necessarily going to prevent COVID. I mean, that's not, I don't think what you're saying, but I think what you're saying is maybe, and this is where your system and other people's systems comes in. If you're collecting the data, right? As one of my teachers used to say, in God we trust and all else get data. And by doing that, you're also making sure you've got control strategies in place, but more importantly, you're able to show that you have made attempts to make the building safe. So you're not necessarily going to negate the fact that somebody goes to your building and get COVID, but you're going to protect yourself by making sure you're doing everything possible and documenting it to make sure that is that kind of what we're thinking here?
Exactly. And I think you touched on a really good point, the whole new area of data with respect to COVID related things. You're right. It's all about collecting the data, doing the analytics, whether it is as simple as how often is the facility cleaned, the bathrooms or the conference rooms, the desk, and so forth and so on. How the occupancy levels are. In other words, if you're having people back in and you want to say you're going to limit a conference room to 3 people, making sure that there's only 3 people in that conference room, not 5 or 6 and so forth and so on. So there's a lot of new data that's being definitely collected and analyzed. And, ultimately, and this is a question I just think about a lot, is will we get to a point in the future that our buildings will be COVID accredited, sort of like LEED or, the other one, well fitness or whatever it is.
Well-being, yeah.
Yeah. And, or like restaurants, in the good old days, we go into restaurants and they had a cleanliness or sanitation rating, A, B, C, or 98%.
Well, like getting on an elevator where it says this elevator was inspected, 6 months ago, and the certificate's down in the office. You might see the same sort of, follow up and standardization, code driven sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, Kenny, remember back in this, before the pandemic hit, Mark, there was, a trend that was just sort of starting. Kenny, remember the concept was called like the well building or whatever. And
Sure.
And they were differentiating the building markets by having, better air changes, and every like vending machine in the place had healthy snacks and so on and so forth. But they were really touting the fact that the water was filtered and the air was filtered and it was a healthy building. And I think they called it a well building, didn't they, Kenny?
Yeah, well, I think given at Harvard, I'm looking it up right now, but yeah, they actually came up with how you would rate and measure and put metrics onto the building's health. Yes. So it was like 10 items, and I'm going to look it up real quick. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think we'll see that as a trend, don't you, Marcus?
Absolutely. And there's right now, I believe I know of 3, not off the top of my head. If people reach out to you guys, I can give you links of accreditation programs that do for COVID, that is accrediting the facility, whether it be a building, a sports arena, a hotel, a retail environment, so forth and so on. And, again, we go back to what we just talked about earlier, trust. If you walk into a building and you see that accreditation, that gives you some sense of trust that things have been done, things are continuing to be done to help prevent the spread. Again, help prevent. You're not, to your point, Eric, I don't think, there's only so much we all can do. Okay. But we've got to be doing something. And anyway.
Well, no. And, Marcus, I want to sort of hop on this because, again, I think, leaders like Lingspring tend to focus when there's a crisis, they tend to focus on what's the opportunity here, right? And so I think, there's the trend was already starting to bubble a little bit. People were trying to differentiate with the well buildings or whatever. But, it kind of reminds me a little bit back when you were working with the supermodels in the 80s. And remember, all the models had the long hair like Cindy Crawford. And I remember that you convinced Linda Evangelizzi, who wasn't really a great fashion model, to buck the trend and cut her hair short. She's the first model to get the short hair, and she went overnight to being a supermodel. So she took the fact that she wasn't as attractive as the other girls didn't have the hair. You had her cut her hair short, and then she set a new trend. And I think from a marketing perspective, and through the course of this show, I want to keep coming back to marketing because, again, you can have the best mousetrap in the world, but if you can't explain it or have people understand what you're trying to do, it just sort of doesn't matter. So, but I think trust is the key. both to, protecting yourself from legal action. But the other thing is trust is, I think, also going to be the key ingredient that's going to be part of your marketing plan, is what's going to make you different. So if you can help your building owner have a building that people trust going in and sort of highlight that. Our building, you're going to be safe. For example, you'll be safer here than you will be at home because we've got air filtration. We're doing this, we're doing that. And I'm kind of wondering too, Marcus, because you guys are able to do this, but I can remember back in the day when energy was the deal. And one of the things these savvy they would have us, put a dashboard up saying, hey, when you walked in, so people would see, they'd say, hey, you're saving 1,000 trees today because this building is so energy efficient. It was important to their customers, and they highlighted that. So how would you put your marketing hat on? What kind of advice could you give our integrators and people, and how would you incorporate this whole trust thing into sort of a marketing approach?
Well, first and foremost, I think once you have the information, it must be communicated clearly, all transparency to the occupants, in this case, of the building and so forth. And we're already starting to see where when you walk into buildings, there are display screens that are saying the facility was cleaned an hour ago. It's scheduled to be cleaned at 2:00, 3:00, so forth and so on. Or the number of occupants in conference room A is 4, so forth and so on. So that information is already starting to be widely publicized in buildings. And I think from the marketing side, that's the only way to do it, is you've got to figure out multiple ways to get that message out so people clearly see it, understand it, and are very comfortable with it.
Okay, now listen, I really want to, we had a highlighter pen on this conversation. What I would highlight is you got to do it anyway just to stay in business. But if you're going to be successful at it, you got to make sure it's visible to your customers. Best example I can give is, and I've mentioned this on the phone before, there's a chain here called Trader Joe's, right? And when you go to Trader Joe's, they have somebody, it costs them money, but they have somebody that stands there, cleans your basket, and hands it to you and make sure you have a mask. They have people going around with spray that are spraying everything, and when people touch it, I know it costs them money, but when I go to the other grocery stores, I don't know whether the baskets have been cleaned or not. There's some wipes out there. I can clean them if I want to. But what that's done for me is it's made me a loyal customer because I don't have to think about the health part of it, right? I got enough on my mind. These people are taken care of, but it's visible. And I think that's a key piece. How can you make what you're doing visible?
Exactly. And what I think we all have to realize is the visible stuff we walk in. We see social distancing. We see hand sanitizer. We see, the visible side of how we all are trying to deal with this. You don't see the non-visible, and the non-visible is our industry. It's our technology. It's the air. It's the filtration. It's the pressurization. It's the humidity. It's the temperature. It's all that. So again, that's not visible when you walk into a building. So displaying it or communicating that in some way, to your point, you must make that visible.
Well, I was able to find it. So the Harvard research details 9 factors that make a healthy building. And it begins with air quality, thermal health, moisture, dust, and pests, safety and security, water quality, noise, lighting and views, and ventilation. But Marcus, I remember back when we were doing the intelligent building run, and we're talking about that smart connected building, and this is probably a couple of years ago now. But you had an experience where you were in an international environment or setting where they were selling buildings, and they were identical except one was an intelligent connected building and one was a dumb building that was standalone. And basically you would put a valuation of some enormous amount of money to that smart intelligent building. Well, I could see that just having a very similar analogy to, like you said, the bio safe building or the pandemic prevented building, and whatever, because you're going to see a metric like this Harvard research factor on a green screen. And they're saying very much like leads. In order to get your full maximum points with leads, you had to have what they call a green screen. And a green screen was the interface between the occupants or visitors into that building's lobby, where they would graphically illustrate how they were saving energy and reducing the carbon footprint and how many trees or whatever, and different organizations had a different approach for it. But I think we're going to see an evolution, and to be ASHRAE driven, I would imagine that you're going to have some sort of a presentation that you've met those standards you're talking about. And it's got to be transparent. It's got to be visible to somebody upon entry. I mean, if you're going to go, like you used to say, Eric, with restaurants and stuff, you won't go into a restaurant that you don't feel comfortable with anymore. If you see or shopping center or Trader Joe's, if you don't think you feel right in that environment, you're going to pass it, go to the next one. So I think ultimately you're going to, it's going to become second nature. Part of the building codes and building standards, right up there with all the things with access control and CCTV and whatever you're going to talk about. You're going to start talking about the ability to rate the building's wellness, its healthiness. Yeah,
I do too. And another thing, just kind of switching some other trends or whatever. We're hearing a lot about the cloud, the edge, and I believe the key word for 2021 to keep in mind is the word hybrid. And hybrid has a lot of meanings. So one is related to our industry is cloud is always not just the answer. Edge is not always the answer. It's a hybrid of the edge and the cloud together. Hybrid now is, we're talking about that in where we work. In other words, for those who work in a city, we are beginning to see movement towards the suburbs. All right. So there will be a hybrid of working in the city, possibly working in the suburbs, and also obviously working remotely from home and so forth and so on. And then hybrid of when we work. So, and I think this goes to another underlying thing that our building automation and controls need to do is, are we going to get back to a day where if there's 500 people working in an office, all 500 are going to be there on any given day? I don't think so for a while. That we might have people on shifts. Monday, Wednesday, we'll have 200 people. And where they sit and where they operate within the building, we want the environmental systems up and running. In other places where there's no one in there, we want to be able to control that and so forth and so on. So again, that gets to the heart of what we talked about early on, is the functionality of our building control systems now.
Right. And Marcus, you hit on a key piece, because my take is, and the trend we're seeing is that commercial real estate's never going to go away, but you've got a law firm or something like that, and maybe you rented 100,000 square feet, and everybody came in every day, and now with COVID, they've invested in the infrastructure for them to work from home, but they're still going to have people come into the office, but they're probably not going to lease the same amount of space. They're going to cut back on the space they lease. So if you're an integrator, I think it's really important to be able to tell those owners that we're already doing hoteling, right? We know how to do that. Our integrators know how to do that. So the ability for a real estate owner, that not an owner, but for a tenant that maybe, is budget constrained, is looking for ways to cut costs, to be able to come in and then do the hoteling and connect all that stuff. I mean, I think it's critical that our integrators, as well as our manufacturers, as well as our consulting engineers, tell this story. I mean, typically we've been the tail that's wagged by the dog, and now I think we really are the dog. And my question for both you guys is, how do we get out in front of it? Do you think we're already leading it? And if not, how do we get out in front, and how do we get that message to the industry that our people and our technology can do the things that need to get done?
Well, I'd like to go right back before we get too far along to Marc's point about the hybrid. There's actually a term that's come out, and I've seen it twice, 3 times now. It's called the Goldilocks Syndrome, where we first worked in the office 100%, maxed it out. It's Papa Bear. Then we worked, from home in our pajamas and whatever, and survived. And that was Baby Bear. And then the hybrid was that in between, somewhere between home and office, and the reutilization of an office, and adding everything we're adding to it, called the Goldilocks Syndrome. So that's the hybrid you're talking about, Marcus. But and Eric, to your point, the biggest eye opener for businesses right now is they will avoid spending money on space they don't need, and don't utilize efficiency. So it's driving those things that you're talking about. Our industry has the ability to placate and improve and demonstrate and actually put into effect all the science and technology to bring about air quality, to bring about humidity control, temperature control, ventilation, dilution, filtration. We have that. That's our sweet spot. It's just that like to Marcus's point previously, now that we have to convert that information to data, and then we have to expose that data into very friendly formats and graphics so that there's an interface that, yes, our filtration systems work, and yes, the filters were changed last Monday, and they're due to be rechanged in 90 days. And yes, our humidity has been maintained between 30% and 60%. And yes, our temperatures have not exceeded, set point plus or minus 2 degrees for the last 30 years. So when you have that kind of a feeling that, somebody is actually marshaling these efforts and documenting them, you're going to be much more likely to come in and trust the environment, and trust the building space. And that in turn leads to your productivity that we mentioned before, that you're going to be happier, quicker, faster, safer.
And then to echo that is this, what you just described and what we have been talking about here is that we don't have to we don't have to invent this. We have had this technology, it's proven, it's real for years now. And it's not something, we got to wait that the building owner or the integrator has to go wait for, it's coming. No, it's not coming. It's here, and it's been here, and it's proven. So, and I think that is part, to your point, Eric, that's part of the challenge in the industry, is that we still have to educate the building owners and operators that the technology is proven, it's here, it exists. There is a tremendous industry of integrators, technology professionals, and so forth and so on that can help you do this, Mr. Ms. Building Owner Operator.
Well, Marcus, I think the marketing aspects are critical, and I keep coming back to it because before the pandemic even happened, Kenny and I were tracking sort of Silicon Valley coming into our space, and it seemed like they were working hand in glove with us and so on and so forth. But if we don't get that message out that we are the source and in a compelling way, they will. Because they've got the budgets that they're spending on the marketing, they're able to figure it out. So it's almost like I could advocate, our industry getting together and forming a coalition to point these solutions back to us. But do you guys, Kenny, specifically? I mean, we were really afraid for a while that Silicon Valley was going to move in and sort of take over. And then, it seemed like it backed off. We were all working together. But do you see this as possible being an opportunity? And do you think our industry should feel threatened by this?
I think our industry has already lost a large percentage of the cloud offerings and whatever because of the AWS and Honeywell Forge and everything. I think and that part of Honeywell, I don't see as part of the building market, but rather the cloud services. And I think we've already experienced it with Nest, with the Silicon Valley coming into the Thermostat, which is the juiciest piece of the pie. And we've seen, I'm not a major manufacturer or vendor that I have specific information of market gain and loss, but I'll guarantee you that Google, what's some of the other ones that have come out with those great thermostats, Ecobee, and of course, Honeywell and Johnson and everybody else also threw some good thermostats out there into the mix. But they lost a lot of the thermostat business, to the Silicon Valley versions of the same things we did, and that was the thermostat. The simple, basic thermostat is now.
But it was the marketing that got it right. I mean, they captured the imagination of the homeowner. I think it was the deep pockets that
you mentioned earlier too. They had enormous funding. They could do whatever it took to get across any. Remember the first versions of the Nest? They had problems with the trickling of recharging the battery, and it would bring on the boiler. Or it was doing things that they couldn't figure out at first. And they finally went back to the drawing board, and they redid the sensors, and they redid this, and they redid the usage of power and fixed it. But that to me, that's already a major demarcation of their penetration into our industry. They looked at our industry and said, hey, you know what? There's only 150 million homes out there. If we get 70% of that business or 50% of the business, it represents this much market. They already took it. It's already gone.
No. What they did, and Marcus, I want to get back to you on this because I know marketing's your forte, but my understanding, it would have never been a campaign in our industry like the Nest thermostat campaign in terms of its scope and its success. And, break down those key elements. What made it so successful? I mean, it was a good product, but we had tons of great products that were less expensive. But that's sort of what I'm getting at. I mean, they have it's the marketing, right? That's
Well, could we ever imagine where a significant amount of players in our industry, tier 1s, tier 2s, tier 3s, all got together and did a campaign on healthy buildings? I'm kind of spitballing here, throw that out, and how technology from all of these providers already exists to the point or whatever, and we collectively are doing it for the greater good of the industry, no matter what company you work for. And there was, back in the day, and I'm trying to think about what it was, there was where an industry got together and did something similar, and they ran, in this case, before internet, and not before internet, but before it was, one of our first go-to, ran ads in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and, Fortune, Forbes, and so forth and so on. And it was a major awareness and wake-up call, and it worked. So Marcus, maybe it's time we do that together.
Yes, and I think that might be a trend. I think we probably need to advocate creating the Healthy Building Coalition, get the major vendors there, the integrators, the distributors, and and that should be something that we market it. To your point, you pay your dues, and that dues gets you whatever it is advertising. But I think if we don't get that awareness up, that we're the solution, because there is definitely a problem that needs to be fixed. And the good news is, it's a problem we already are fixing. The bad news is, I think if we don't bring that awareness that we're the people that have the solution, then, my fear would be that we have another, Nest type bypass, and we're sort of left holding the bag.
And it goes to one of Kenny's favorite words, co-opetition.
Yep.
In other words, again, I know that's one of your favorite words, and I, and truly, that the fact that you come together, it's for the benefit of all, because when one person succeeds, the rest of the group succeeds as well. So.
Well, it is one of my favorite words, and I was intrigued when I first heard that, and then I got the book, of course, and read it, and but then I think what came after that, immediately after that, was that collaboration, the collaboratorium that you and Ken St. Clair did, and I thought that was extraordinary, because in my opinion, that was actually a pivot point in our industry, where so many people got in the room at the same time. And the critical information was disseminated to all these really, truly organizational leaders and commanders in chief of their own little fiefdoms, and vendors were there and whatever. And I don't think I've ever seen such a quick response by so many organizations, so many businesses to get on board with a smart, connected, intelligent. We all learned about the 330, 300 about the same time. We all discovered the master systems integrator in about that same period, because it all came out, one of my opinions would be that came out of that collaboratorium at AHR back about 2006, say 2015, it was like eye-opening, and I'll never forget, some of the guys up on that board, you and what's his name? Well, of course, Ken St. Clair, they had a guy from Distech, they had a guy from Ocean, they had a guy from, and they were all just exposing all these real high-level, announcements about how they were going to, get into, put the arms down, put the spears down, put the armor down, and share and get the information, so that we all benefited by it. So I think that whole concept of the collaboratorium, which was, I think, new to our industry, really took effect. I mean, we had things like BACnet organization, we had people, but for the most part, vendors were trying to protect their proprietary interests to the fullest extent possible. When he finally had to go all in with open, or at least he go partially in on open, it really accelerated the development of our industry. So many APIs came out, so many, I think the distributors bounced up, a couple of distributors in the country, a couple of contractors, all of a sudden in that free spirit rose above branches. They rose above local entities and showed that they could do the same thing that was previously only the domain of a vendor that had a vertical, capabilities to go into vertical markets and take it from top to bottom, whether it was an airport or a hotel or a school district. All of a sudden we saw this collaboratorium where people shared information. Everybody got instantly smart. I don't mean like, genius smart. I just mean they got on the same business path, and look, here we are 5 years later. And I just think we made tremendous progress as an industry. And Eric, back to your point about the Silicon Valley, and do I think we're going to lose more business? I think that the market is so large. I think that the ability, one of the things that Google did and with the Nest and everything is they connected those residential buildings. I mean, the government has its plans. It has its smart grid. It has its demand response, and it needed cooperation in a new level, new format. And the existing vendorships, they did their share, but they still, again, went at it kind of a check and balance type of thing, where somebody like Nest went all in. Whatever the government wanted to connect these notifications on the smart grid, all the way to the experiment they did where they put all the thermostats that were on the grid on the battery backup and took that energy, that power, and diverted it to it was like an experiment. But they put hundreds of thousands of thermostats on battery backup and steered that power to another place that needed it during a brownout to prove that they were making progress. You guys, you're aware of that, right? We talked about that on Control Trends before. So I think what happened was that the maneuverability of a new player that didn't have all those legacy systems to protect and honor, and all those cash cows that were out there, they couldn't afford to cannibalize those to go into a new venture so quickly. A new player could come in there without any of that legacy restriction and without any concerns about the previous generations and integrations and stuff. So I think they came in clean-handed, so they weren't holding baggage that they couldn't work with well.
And part of this, as I see, it's sort of, I'm kind of digressing a little bit, is that a trend, there are now some incentives, and I don't know if that's the right word or not, but I'll just use that, for building the environmental systems in buildings. All right. So one is keeping politics out. That when the new administration has said roughly they're committed to getting 14 million buildings, government and private sector, to participate in climate change and whatever, to get the buildings, to perform more energy, sustainability, whatever. So that's one. Again, politics out, 14 million. Two is the CARES Act, which was enacted a while ago. All of these upgrades that to create these healthy, well-being buildings fall under the CARES Act. And I say that with a caveat, check with your tax accountant first. But anyway, but for the most part, they all do. And where the CARES Act comes in, it's existing buildings. It's not new constructions. It's systems to upgrade in existing facilities. And there is a tax incentive for doing it, and you can depreciate much sooner. And give or take, I saw an example the other day where, let's say the cost was $500,000, and without the CARES Act and with the CARES Act, with the CARES Act, they were able to save an additional $175,000 because they were able to depreciate it much quicker than over the normal lifetime span. So, I mean, you know, so there's a lot of things. Our industry, again, we're all proven. We have all great technology that, you know, we need to be helping spread that word to building owners and operators. So.
Absolutely. In fact, we tracked that CARES Act down because, like you said, you couldn't use it to expand your building or put elevators in or escalators, but you could use it to replace any of your interior subsystem, your fire alarm, you know, your HVAC, building automation. And not only could you do the 100% deduction in the first year, to your point, Marcus, but you could also deduct labor, which was a new innovation that you could deduct the entire cost of it. So that is certainly a large carrot. And it looks like the political thing you were talking about. One of our big concerns was when we got all CARES Act friendly and started to use it as a real carrot to get people to motivate, you know, this is the time to do it. And this is what you need to do. If you want your building, it's lagged behind. You've basically neglected the interior of your building for a while due to other constraints and challenges you had. But now all of a sudden, if you stop and you really look at it, you want to bring your building up to this anticipated standard, but we certainly know what will be the characteristics of the fundamental you know, requirements of the COVID or pandemic-proof building. It's going to have basically a renovated system where you're going to be pushing air through the building. You're going to filter it. You're going to be able to dilute, bring in a whole lot of air to do air change outs of zones, and you need to facilitate that. So you're going to need some infrastructure. You can do fans, you know, new equipment. So when the most recent political thing happened, we were worried that they were going to remove the CARES Act or basically repeal it or whatever you do to take back a law that was put into effect. That's been left alone. So it's a really great opportunity for our industry, whether you're a contractor, whether you're a building owner or distributor or a vendor, pursue that. And we've got some vendors that really track this hard, and we get periodic updates. You know, but once a week we get a CARES Act where they do that example that you're talking about, where, you know, it was $1 million and you know. But then all of a sudden, the benefit was that they got, you know, they're back on top. The people that own the building feel much more confident. They can keep their prices where they're at because they know they've got a very, you know, updated, refreshed building, and it's a safe environment, and everything that we're looking forward to that new, you know, beyond COVID building. They're there and they're ready to go. They're ready to bring things in and get things going. I wanted to just reiterate, though, that there's been a resurgence on the value of that office. There's been a resurgence in some of the great minds in the real estate business and the great investment you know, bodies that you know, they know that this is going to come back. We've got to get back to the third quarter of 2019. But they're saying that we need the office. We're learning that there's consequences. There's unintended consequences. There's things that happen you know, from home, but, you know, not everybody can adapt their home to meet the office. So they said the four main reasons that the office is going to continue and it's going to rebound is the social needs, the basic primal esteem needs of people. They need to be part of an organization. They need to learn from people, mentorship. So it creates a productive environment that can't be done remotely. The capital requirements that you need to be able to do businesses. I mean, how many people have CAD machines? You know, how many people have computers at the home that used to be, you know, purchased by the corporation at the office, and they can't access them remotely? They need to be physically in place to use the capital equipment. And then the management requirements for command and control. Just like they're finding out with education. I don't know what you guys hear in your nightly news, but we're getting feedback that although we're holding our own, the quality, the standards of education is the resultants of the first 2 or 3 quarters is that our numbers are going down. The kids are learning, but they're not learning at the rate, and they're falling behind as far as what they should be in the progression charts as far as what you're supposed to learn in year 3 or 4 or 5 or 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. So they're tying that back to that you can only get so much of the education remotely. And a certain portion of that education learning is facilitated by in residence, working in an environment like a classroom with teachers, with hands-on experiments, with learning how Charlie did it this way and Sally did it this way, and then you learn how to do it your way. I remember when our kids were in tennis, there were like 3 ways to learn. You know, you could have one-on-one with lessons with a professional. Then you could do group lessons, and then you do your self-initiated, workouts and whatever. But the opinion was that the group lessons provided the greatest transfer of learning for certain things, like how to hit.
Kenny, I got to tell you that those statements are about the most encouraging things I've heard in a while. So, I really hope that bears fruit, because when people come back to the buildings, that's good for our business, and then maybe we'll even build some more buildings. But Marcus, what other trends are you potentially seeing in 2021?
Well, the other one is, we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, the movement of the building architecture from vertical to horizontal. And this is being driven by the IP movement, the fact that controllers today, devices today are much more powerful than they ever have been before. The fact that the expense of those have come down. In other words, part of those components, the memory, so forth and so on. And the fact that, it's now more important than ever before to look at real-time data analytics, and so forth and so on. So I think that's one of the trends I'm seeing, and I believe it will continue to go that way, and this will be the new part of our industry and how we do things, this more of a horizontal architecture versus the traditional one where we've seen vertical, over the years. So I think that's one. And I also think, to me, a trend, and this is sort of a negative one, is that I look at our industry, and this is again where I think we could all come together and beside promoting what we just talked about, is the getting more folks into our industry. Okay. In other words, I keep seeing there are lots of job opportunities in our industry. And we are challenged to find people to fulfill those jobs. And I think that is a trend that for the foreseeable future, I see that is going to remain with us unless we figure this out together on how to get more people excited about our industry, really know our industry. It's not just going to sitting in a boiler room anymore. It's high tech. It's exciting. It's graphical. It's, it's control from a remote location, for goodness sakes. It's, it's truly technology at its best, but there's still a perception, in my opinion, that they look at it as the old way in which the industry has kind of grown up in. So we got to continue to attract people into the industry. Agree with that. So that trend's not going to change. Yeah. And got you. And I think lastly, and this is, I guess maybe for us all, that the one of the things that I believe that we all, both as professionals and as well as people, that one thing that this whole thing has done and will continue is that character is everything. And I think, as we continue to overcome and adjust to this whole global pandemic, that the character of us as leaders, as individuals or whatever, matters, and matters more than it ever has before. So
I like it. Well, it gets back to your trust theme. You got to be a trusted resource, and more so now than ever.
You are a big fan of that integrity economy. Remember that? What's that all about?
Kenny's referring to is Jeff on a podcast we did with him referred to the fact that, your word is everything now in this economy, and we're in the integrity economy, really and truly. You think about it. If you don't have a great product, you're not in the game. If you don't have great service, you're not in the game. And integrity is everything. And especially, it's a small industry anyway, fellas, as you guys know. I mean, if it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and 1 or 2 moments to lose it. So,
going back to the education thing, getting more people into our industry is this. I kind of also look at all the folks, unfortunately, who have lost their jobs in other industries or whatever as a result of this. And luckily, the 3 of us and listeners, we're lucky, we're still here, thank goodness. But how do we get these folks who are great individuals, great people who work and have a lot to contribute, how do we get them into our industry? And I guess where I'm going is, it's not just the new, younger folks. We've got folks who definitely have a lot to offer. How do we get them into our industry?
Well, Marc, maybe some of your supermodel friends could help. It is. I mean, and if you think about, sort of getting back to one of the reasons Kenny and I sort of created the Control Trends Awards was we felt that our industry sort of lacked sort of glamour and recognition on a large scale. So part of the logic in that was create our Hollywood moment, and it was a way to sort of showcase that our industry recognizes as great people, and they get their Hollywood moments, and I think that means a lot. I can't tell you, Kenny, I know you had the same experience. You probably did too, Marc. When we would somebody would win an award, we would video it, and then people would come up to us and say, guys, thank you so much. My wife and kids finally think I'm cool and they understand what I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's that. We all need that, especially guys like us, us males with our big egos, right? We need a little bit of that recognition. So I think that's a part of it. And again, maybe if we get back to this coalition, this Healthy Building Coalition, maybe, on the agenda could be, how do we attract more people to the industry? Because I think if we work together and invested money in advertising and brought it up on people's radar that these careers exist. I mean, the Marines do it, right? The Navy does it. The Army does it. Join the Navy and see the world, right? It's like, join the HVAC, the smart building controls industry and save the planet. Mm-hmm. It's not that we don't have a compelling story. It's just we need a medium to tell it with.
Well, I think we fought a lot of, the whole technical train. The way our school systems are designed, grade school, you go to middle school, then you go to high school, and then there's a big, I don't want to say tournament or contest, but then you go to college. And I think what happened was our whole academic system was based on the successful outcome was how many people you put in college, how many people you put into secondary education, and without really any consideration of what the needs of the country were or the infrastructure was, and that is technicians, that is tradespeople, that is people that can build things and make things work. And unlike the European countries that reward that handsomely, and I go back to that Der Stern magazine in German, when I lived there, one of the most impressive presentations I've ever seen on careers was on the cover of Der Stern, which is basically like Life magazine or whatever, not Life, but what's Time magazine, probably Time magazine. And it had the picture of like 12 different professions, doctor, lawyer, pilot, investment banker, HVAC technician, bus driver, truck driver, whatever. And it basically categorized, it put them in the different orders of esteem. And one of them was salaries. And I'll never forget, that in Germany, the tradesman he was like the 4th or 5th highest occupation out of those 12. There's a misconception that just because you're doing a trade or just because you're a technician, that it's not a good living and make money. But in Europe, they reward you. My father-in-law, my wife's German, and he was like the superstar of their little town. Every time something broke, whether it was the church, the bakery, they would come knocking on his door, and he would rescue the situation. And he was very well regarded in the community, and never had an idle day. But in America, for some reason, we've not given the technical people their due glory. We never identify somebody that's a technician with a successful career. It's like you fell into it because you couldn't do anything else, or because you couldn't be the bank manager. And that's got to change. I think we've made a lot of progress, though. I really do. Some of the people we've met over the years, Eric and Marc, have dedicated their lives to make these improvements. And beginning with Young Guns, and before that with Ken St. Clair, and I think everybody that has put time in this career field now looks back and tries to make amends and honor it. And that's certainly why we did Control Trends. Remember, Marcus, the first couple calls we made to you is, would this work? We certainly need it, but how would our industry receive it? Would they congratulate this and say, yeah, I want to be part of this? But Eric, to your point, what was that? There was a Honeywell sales engineer that had worked, 44 years or 47 years? And they didn't even give gold watches out anymore. It was just, hey, thank you, Jerry. Great job. Love you. Bye. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's changing, because I think that, Marcus is an employer, just like, Kenny with you and with us. It's like, your people are everything. So if you get them, you better treat them right. And then, so I think it's more of how do we attract, I think once we get them in, for the most part, they stay, because it's a great industry, but it's just how do you get them in? Listen, guys, we're running out of time here. Kenny, anything else you want to mention before we let Marc have the final word?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to say about Robin gave us a heads up, an early heads up to the Haystack Connect magazine is out, and we'll be posting it on Connection Magazine Fall 2020. Let's see, is that the one here? It is amazing publication again. We got a chance to see it, and I can tell you that it's the best one ever. I think she just does a great job, but there's so much content. Marcus, you can tell us a little position with Project Haystack. You're still one of the officers.
I'm still one of the board members and the executive secretary of the Project Haystack organization. And it is, the fall issue is going to be officially released early next week. And it is definitely full of absolute fantastic content, and all about data, tagging, modeling, a lot of contributors from around the globe. And definitely go to Project Haystack, project-haystack.org, and get your free copy. And it's good. It's good.
Excellent. Marc, anything else you want to touch on before we hop off here?
No, just I think as an industry, we all continue to rock and roll together, and need to be flexible and resilient. And we will all maintain and thrive. So
prevail, baby. Yep.
Well said, Marcus. Okay, I think that is a great note to end on. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Control Talk, now your smart buildings videocast and podcast. Special thanks to our co-host, Marc Petock, linkspring.com. Check him out. And the man, the myth, the legend, the one, the only bionic man, Kenny Smyers at Jackson Controls. And with that, we will bid you adieu. Remember, be bold, stay in control, stay healthy, and we'll see you next week.
Indeed, Eric.
Indeed, fellas. And that's a wrap. Now, Marcus, I wanted you to tell us some more about you and Linda Evangelista. How did you coach her to cut her hair off?
Hey, I can't tell you that. I don't know where you dug that one up. Yeah.
I read about it in the magazine, man.
Yeah. That's